All right, this is part two of Campaign Diary 3 for Shadowdark. Part one, the memory on my phone was full, which is when I realized I needed to upload these videos to YouTube in order to get them off my storage space for my phone. So we have solved that problem. We are now back on the grind. This is picking up. I believe they had just gotten back to the medicine woman's abode. There was a little bit of contention over this because my players insisted that they had visited the medicine woman's home before they went over to the goblin's place. I don't remember that at all, and I don't think that they did, but they both insisted, and I didn't have a whole lot of notes, and it had been a while. These are the sorts of things that happen when you have to take breaks from your games, and it's a few weeks in between each session. So I said, yeah, sure, okay, that happened. I think it was like it's like a big tree, and her abode was sort of like down into the roots of the tree. You know, classic druid woods person type shit. They rested up there. The poison from the spiders wore off from both the medicine woman and our priest player character who had been poisoned. They slept there safely through the night with the medicine woman's rescued pig happy to be home. They traveled back to the goblin lair the next day safely, no encounters. They went back in, got back to the room where they had left off that had been blocked off by a boulder, and was full of, piles of dead bodies stacked in front of demonic statues. They go in, they're examining these statues. There were three statues. One was like straight at the end of the room, and then there were one on either side of the room, corresponding to two doors that were also leading off from either side of the room. And I described them as having, or as, when you look at them, their eyes were gold. It was somewhat difficult to describe because basically what it is that it's like old flecked chipped paint that has been painted on their eyes. So it's sort of challenging to describe that in a way that is indicating that there's something there that would be worth looking at, but without just making it straight up sound like they have like gems for eyes, the classic statue thing. I don't remember exactly how I described it, but did it in such a way to entice one of the player's interests, aka the loot goblin, the thief. Because, of course it would be the thief who would go look at weird statues, weird eyes. But as they're looking around the room, out of one of the piles of bodies bursts what is known in Shadowdark as a cave creeper. It's known in D&D as a carrion crawler, classic monster. Gigantic, 100-legged, massive centipede type thing with tentacles, poisonous, coming off of its face. it comes bursting out of one of these piles of bodies, giving it surprise on the party. But both my wife's character and my buddy's character are goblins, which cannot be surprised. That's come up quite a few times in this campaign. I try to make sure that it comes up because that can be sort of like a niche bonus to have. Like, can't be surprised how often does that come up. Well, I'll make sure it comes up fairly often. And I think just in Shadowdark, as Shadowdark is written, it is meant to come up pretty often. Like, especially because nighttime, like random encounters, the way that the system is set up, it surprise is like a big part of it. So I'm happy with that. How she's made the rules make that racial ability relevant. So Cave Creeper comes bursting out of the bodies, surprises the ranger, archer, fighter, elf, whatever she wants to be called, and the other priest, the two goblin player characters. Not surprised. Pretty straightforward fight. Again, this is one of these things that's difficult to remember at this point, but I think typical like attrition type stuff. I don't think any one character really had it taken to them particularly hard. They defeat the cave creeper. The goblin thief messes around with the statue eyes. The way it worked was if you press them, both of the eyes in at the same time, it would unlock one of the doors. So statue on the right side of the room would unlock the door off to the right. Statue on the left side of the room would unlock the door leading off to the left. I don't think they ever actually did that, because the doors could also be forced open, but just with a high, like DC 18, which in Shadowdark is like the highest DC, unless you want to get ridiculous. DC 18 strength check. But my wife's goblin character, who is ironically the strongest character in the party, Gabo Strong, has a crowbar, which gives you advantage on strength-related checks to, force things open. And every time they use this fucking crowbar, they roll like at least an 18. So no problem, never any problem. That's how they got into this room as well, as moving the boulder aside. So they open the first door, they go back through the tunnel, relatively short tunnel, leads to a stone door. I described them hearing through the door like small but malevolent voices, like as if they're coming from like miniature creatures or something, but they sound foul. And these creatures were, I believe they're called imps, classic, like miniature devils, like literally like the little like, red fork, like pointed tail, little pointed ears, like the classic like little devil that we all think of, that from like, I don't know, like a cartoon or something. Those things, but miniature versions of them, like an evil Cupid or something. So, and they want to try to bust the door open and get surprise on them. And I said, all right, well, it's a stone door, and it's old, pretty heavy door. So you would have to, like, really be able to, like, throw that thing open very quickly in order to get surprise on them. So I had them make a check for it. I think that's an appropriate place in Shadowdark for a check to be asked for. And, of course, my wife's strong goblin, with its crowbar, rolled very high, flung the door open. Party goes rushing in. The imps like turn around. They're in there like scrawling, like demonic diabolical messages all over the walls and above. Like there's like little altars in this room, and they're like standing on these altars, like scribing things onto the wall with their little like demonic fucking claw fingernails. They burst in, get surprised. The imps turn around like another fairly straightforward fight. I remember my wife's character took a lot of damage. She got, a lot of damage. She's a thief. She got down to 2 HP, so she probably took like 4 total damage. But, a lot of damage for her. I think my buddy's character got poisoned. I think that's what these things do. They poison you. I might have changed what their actual ability was from the core book. It might have been a little more similar to the spider's ability, where it kind of just drops you for a certain amount of time. And I was like, they just did that. So I changed it to a like damage over time sort of thing, where you keep taking damage each round. I think also with like a constitution check to make it stop. Found a little bit of loot in there. Should mention that also at like the sacrificial altar that was outside of this place to begin with. They found a magic dagger. Had a like a crescent moon etched onto it. Otherwise like jet black. Then I said that was worth 3 XP, which again, I think in this game, at least the way I run it, anything that's like a permanent powerful magic item, which to me, like a +1 weapon, especially in Shadowdark, is very powerful, that's going to be 3 XP. And then they found a couple other little, like, D100 rolls on the level 0 through 30 treasure table, stuff like that. So they're probably rocking like 5-6 XP at this point. Once they get back to town, they'll get it. They finish this room. They go back into the room with all the corpses and the demonic statues, and they go into the door leading off to the other way. Of course, easily opened by the strong goblin. They get to the back of this room, and it is... it's like a circular rough stone room with like an arcane circle, like symbol type thing, scrawled on the floor. I think they intuited that it was a summoning circle. I don't remember exactly what my description was. But I think it either led them in that direction, or, I didn't discourage them when they were coming to that conclusion. And I described the walls of this room to have shadows, like roughly in the shape of like humanoid type figures, but like sort of amorphous, sort of like blobby, so you couldn't really tell like, oh, that's a human, that's an orc, blah, blah, blah. And I described them as like frozen into the wall in the same way as if you've seen images of like the Hiroshima or Nagasaki atomic bombings at the end of World War II, where I'm not a fucking physicist, but the force of the blast, the sudden like flash of light was so blinding and so intense. Everything about the experience of a nuclear bomb going off was so intense that it would burn people's shadows into like the walls of buildings where they were standing when the blast went off. Oh, I thought that was fucking crazy, super creepy. And both my players got it immediately. They were like, yep, we know what you're talking about, we get it. And there was a potion sitting on the floor in the middle of this summoning circle. Little did I know how much this potion was going to come into play here. It was a potion of vitality from the core book, which when you drink it, it permanently gives you one hit die roll max HP. So the priest who picked it up, if they had drank the potion, or, kept it, drank it later, because of course I don't tell them what things are unless they have a wizard with them who can identify magic items, or maybe a character and their background makes it them like uniquely suited to be able to know what that item is. I don't tell them what it is. They can use it. They can get maybe a little bit of a sense of what it is, but it's not identified. So the priest picked this thing up. If they had drank it, they would have got a 1d6 roll for their permanent max HP. They did not drink it. What they did was, I think when they picked this thing up, I had at least one shadow, maybe more, step off the wall. And these things are shadows from the core book. Don't do much damage, but they drain con, I think. They drain something. And then when you hit 0, you die. You're just dead. So now, this character, my buddy's priest, when they saw that things were coming off of the wall, shadows were moving, on their turn, they took this potion and shattered it on the ground in the middle of this summoning circle. This really, really took me out of left field. My other player, my wife, was very unhappy that my buddy had decided to do this. And this was not like, oh, my character's unhappy that your character is doing that. No, this was a moment of like genuine like player conflict where my wife was like, why are you doing that? Like, why? She looked at it as like, you're just being like, LOL, so random, just being chaotic when it doesn't make any sense because he's a lawful priest. You're just sort of doing shit to see what happens. And I think like my buddy does have some of that streak in him, like do shit to see what happens, which, to be fair, is like, it's good to have that in a group because there is a lot of cool shit, especially in Shadowdark and like old school D&D in general. Like, there's so much stuff that if you, like, it presents you with a choice of like, do you want to interact with this? Do you want to fuck around with it? And there might not really be a good reason why your character would do that, because your character doesn't want to die. Presumably your character is quite averse to death. But at the same time, it's a game. We're all playing a game. We want to see cool shit. I, as the GM, there's a lot of cool stuff that the players are never, ever going to see. A lot of good loot they're never going to get unless they make decisions like this to like sort of mess with stuff. Just poke things and see what happens. Now, in this particular case, I hadn't really, or at least I didn't think that I really indicated that there was like something like that to do here. Like, oh, try this crazy thing, like interact with this thing in a crazy way and something will happen. I just described it as like, yeah, it's a magic circle, like summoning circle, and there's a potion set in the middle of it. And then when they took that potion, things started like coming off the wall and attacking them. So maybe like, I guess I could see how that might seem like a setup for like, whoa, this potion's like connected to this circle. Like, what's going on here? I don't know. Maybe do something with it. See what happens. I'm still not really sure like what he thought would happen. If he had an idea of what would happen. Just unclear. My buddy, he gets ideas and he runs with them, which again, like I appreciate it. It makes things happen. And he's usually very committed to role playing his character. He'll make exceptions to that when like there's something just obviously cool and fun to do, and he wants to do it, and his character might not do it. Which again, like as we're all players of this game, I think it's fine to just like let it go. Like just we all want to have fun and see cool things happen, so we don't have to be like shackled to our role playing, especially if there's no chaotic character in the party who would just do stuff like that. So I'm assuming, he at least had like a good role play reason in mind why his character would do that. But and it's funny because I used to think of my wife as more like the committed role player, and my buddy more I would describe as like myself, where we like role play and we're always asking ourselves like, what would our character do? But we also, it's a game, and like we're gamers. We want to have fun. Like we want to, maybe like min max a little bit, stuff like that. Just play a game as a game. But the more the time that's gone by, I think I might have that reversed actually. Where my buddy, he is a truly like committed role player. Like the other time in this little 3-person group that we've had like a big conflict between the players, it was very similar where my buddy was making a decision with his character that 100% his character would have done. Like from a role-playing aspect, it made complete sense. But from a gameplay standpoint, it put the party at risk, like a big risk. And my wife was very upset that he would put like role play ahead of like what's fun, I guess. Like what's fun and tactically advantageous for the party. So I think she, like, don't get me wrong, she likes role playing and everything, and I think she also asks herself like, what would the character do? But she role plays, I think, like within the framework of like the understanding, like the meta understanding that like this is a game, we're playing a game, like high level board game, and that we want to like keep things moving forward and running relatively smoothly. I think she's more like that than my buddy, who is more like genuinely committed to the role play and will make decisions that are bad, but accurate to what the character would do. So he smashes this thing. There's a discussion between the players. Play kind of stops for a few minutes. I screwed up where I let the control of time get away from me. What I should have done was, as soon as I saw that my wife was reacting very negatively to this, I should have frozen time and said, okay, Gabo, who is my wife's character, the loot goblin, say, you see Gritst, who is my buddy's character, the goblin priest. Say, Gabo, you see Gritst raising this potion over his head, looking as though he's about to smash it on the ground inside the summoning circle. Like, what do you do? What do you say? That's what I should have done. And then they could have had this discussion before the decision was made. But I didn't do that for some reason. It just didn't occur to me, even though I know that that's a thing, and I've used that trick before to like derail potentially bad situations like this. But I didn't. I just let it happen. I said it happened, and like, okay, so now we're just having a discussion after it's already happened. So while they're bickering, basically, I'm scrambling, trying to figure out what the hell to do. There's a book I have up there. It's a little like pamphlet type book literally called Bad Things Happen. And there's just a bunch of roll tables in there for like all sorts of situations, like what happens if the characters get lost in the woods, what happens if they run out of light in the dungeon, things like that. And I was like, all right, well, there's a bunch of spell mishap tables in there. So I was like, okay, I think we'll just roll on one of these spell mishap tables. And this was like a combination of random tables, but then also me in my head trying to think of like what makes sense for the situation. I don't remember exactly what the roll was for the table. They rolled a 66. I remember that because I thought it was funny because, almost 666, and we're in a weird demonic summoning situation. So I thought that was funny. I also thought that meant like, oh, this is definitely bad. You just rolled a 6-6. This has to be bad. Seems like it would have been bad anyway. I mean, like, what are we doing here? We're smashing magical items on like demonic summoning circles. Probably won't have a good result. Basically, and then what I ruled was that all of the shadows around them start stepping off the wall and coming after the party. And once I narrated this, the party booked it out of there as quickly as they could. There was a very close run thing where I think a chunk of these shadows had the same initiative as our fighter ranger character, the elf. And like, if her dex hadn't been higher than the shadows to break the initiative tie so that she went first, I think she was straight up dead. She was the last character in the room, and she was, I think she was surrounded or close to surrounded, and their turn was next, so she would have gone down. But she made it thanks to her dex. They all come running out of this room. I ruled that the shadows only followed them as far as like the room with all the bodies and the demonic statues. Because that made sense to me. Like, first of all, I don't think like demonically summoned shadows are going to chase you out into like the sunlight, in like broad daylight. That doesn't really make sense. But then also it makes sense to me that they would be sort of bound to this room that they're summoned in. They can't just wander off and do whatever they want. And it's a very like, cinematic moment. Cool from a storytelling standpoint. Like, they're all booking it out of this very like pulp adventure, booking it out of this room where, they're being chased by a horde of demonic shadows after they accidentally summon these things. The other priest in the party, who is also lawful, follows the same deity as my buddy's priest. I had Herbie, like, give him shit for it, be kind of upset with him about it. And then when they got back to the medicine woman, she was asking them, like, oh, how did things go? What'd you find in there? Da-da-da. And he was basically lying by omission, not telling her about the thing. And I had the other lawful priest, like, butt into the conversation once she saw that he was not giving the full truth. And she was like, oh, he's not telling you this and that and this, and like he did this. And then when they got back to the town, the priest of the same goddess, Madeira, in town, the priest from their party kind of went like tattling to the priest in town. And then I had the priest in town kind of give my buddy like some shit too and say like, oh, you need to like make amends, make penance, blah, blah, blah. Afterwards, I had mixed feelings about doing this because at the time, the sort of vibe of the session was like, oh, why did you, one player, do this silly thing? Weren't you so silly? Wasn't that dumb? Don't you deserve to be scolded for it? And then afterwards, I was like, that was kind of like Bush League, I think. They were just fucking around. They were just having fun. They wanted to see things happen. So, was it... I don't think it was right on my part to, like, really lean into, like, the, everyone's mad at you kind of dynamic, which, especially when it's me and my wife, and then, like, he's the third player. I don't think it was a great dynamic. I should have been more, like, even-handed, more, like, neutral. like when he was lying to the medicine woman, it would make sense that the priest would like step in, the other priest would step in and be like, hey, like you're not telling the whole truth. Because in that case, like, hey, you are lying. Like you're straight up lying pretty much by omission, and you are a lawful follower of a lawful God, so you probably shouldn't do that. But as far as like everything else, it's, whatever. The medicine woman did, once they got back with everything, she had brewed up the, like healing concoction, which was the whole reason they'd come out here in the first place, to get the healing concoction for the people from Last Watch, the first village that they started in. So they traveled back safely to Galena, the larger town. They got back. The two priests went to the priest in town. They had that whole thing. Priest is like, oh, you should do penance, da-da-da. They caroused. Don't think they leveled up off this carouse. They might have. No, they did. They did, actually. My bad. So they leveled up, did their buying and selling. I think a couple other things happened, but that is what I remember of that session. So yeah, that was the end of session 3.